Welcome in, guys. Sorry about the technical difficulty, but YouTube stream is working, so if you guys want to tune in on the YouTube side, you can. Thank you for the raid, Nomad. We're actually about to get started here in about 5 minutes. It's alright, Nomad. No issues, and thank you, Midnight, for the follow. But yeah, we will be getting started here in just a second. No problem though, Matt. I always appreciate it, and good seeing you. It's been a while. Okay, so server is reset. We'll be hopping back into the server in just a moment. And we will be getting started, pretty much jumping straight into qualifying for tonight's season opener, the TRC GT4 M2 Cup Multi-Class Series. And we will have our season opener at Paul Ricard here momentarily. We'll just allow the majority of the server to join in before I do, is to avoid any issues, and then we will get started. Out early for a quick practice session is Little Bird in the BMW M2. The younger son to the older Bird that a few of you may know, a longtime TRC driver. currently the only driver out on track for this quick practice session. Most of the practice will have been done throughout the practice sessions on the server leading up to tonight's event, so not too much need to practice, as there has been plenty of drivers on track getting some practice in before the official server had been opened. So quick 5-minute free practice, about 2.5 minutes left in that before we get started with qualifying. We do have a 20-minute split qualifier, so it will be 10 minutes to our GT4, so a bit backwards to how you have a lot of your split qualifying. The faster cars will be going first, and the slower cars going in the second of the 2 split qualifying sessions. Bird going a bit wide at turn 8 there. Sorry, I believe that would be turn 9. And sliding the rear on the brakes, just trying to get the front end slowed down, the rear not quite wanting to cooperate. And not much aerodynamic help on these BMWs. But they are rowdy, that's for sure, and can develop some absolutely phenomenal racing out there on track. Bird will get one more opportunity at a flying lap here in free practice. No other takers before we get started with our qualifying. Hippie Racer, thank you for the follow. Just trying to work the wheel into turn 1 and turn 2. Very quick chicane, the first 2 turns on track. And then a very complex section down here at the bottom end of the track. The turns 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 complex. Very hard to try and get the car rotated nicely, get all the power down. And you definitely need to carry as much power and momentum onto the backstretch as you can. Bird actually going to abandon the lap there, and we'll get a bit of a look at our grid. Quite a few drivers and names that you may recognize from previous TRC seasons, and quite a few that you may not recognize. Right, I believe one of those, Smith Labe, rookie in the previous season, the TRC Posh British GT3 season, taking the championship there, getting promoted to either gold or platinum. Don't exactly know how high he went, but an immediate promotion from rookie on up. But we have quite a few new drivers, right? Smith, Prine, Ewer, and Bird both making a return. And qualifying has begun. It will be GT4 to start. And who will be our first taker? There is an Alpine in the Alpine of Mansueto. But is it going to be Labe out first in the Camaro? Yes, it is. Labe out of pit lane first. 10 minutes for our GT4 field to qualify. And across both classes, we do have 24 cars taking the track as of right now. And these Camaros, while they are a lot to handle, can definitely be very quick, especially in a straight line with the long backstretch that we have here at Circuit de Paul Ricard. If you're in a GT4 that's not a Camaro, you are definitely going to want to be in the slipstream of one of these Camaros or the Aston Martin, a V12 Beast. So let's go on board with Labe and listen to that LS motor sing. Full blast, full song up through the gears, down the backstretch here at Paul Ricard. No, we don't use that fancy old chicane that the Formula One crew uses. No, we are flat out from end to end, reaching GT3 speeds of GT4 cars here by the time you come to the chucker end zone, really the commitment point, the point of no return. We are going to see a lot of drivers going wide there at turn 8. Coming through 9 and 10, just trying to get the car rotated as best as possible. You do see the Aston Martin behind, Trying to figure out which of the Aston Martins that is. That is the 9 of Wagner. A little bit of a number change there on the Aston Martin GT4. The 009. No 007 here. Or at least not that I have seen so far. Eddie in the Aston Martin as well. But it will be Lab A. First out of the final corner, first out of the pit lane, first across the line to start our GT4 qualifying. Track is optimum, so not really going to have to worry about too much track development, and Wagner will try and stay in the slipstream of this Camaro as long as possible. Lab A, very, very strong in the Posh British GT3 Championship. We did see him have an absolutely dominant display in the old Aston Martin V12, but dropping 4 cylinders from that V12 into a Camaro GT4, I believe it's the ZL1 1LE GT4R. We'll see if he holds similar pace in an American-made car, but still in Europe. We are in the French countryside, though. So as long as Lab A stays valid, we will see our first flying lap of GT4 qualifying. And almost like a NASCAR track, you hear the loud GT4s off in the distance, just slowly getting closer and closer until you get the blast of that LS song being played from the Camaro. Wagner and the Aston Martin behind down the backstretch. That gap is going to open up, but as we come into the braking zone, we come back into Sector 3, that is where the Aston Martin really should start to build that time back up. Down into turns 12 and 13. This may be a struggle point for the Camaro, really dependent on low-end torque and traction. That Camaro has plenty of torque, but that is sort of the problem. Don't want to spin those tires too much. 204.167 from Lab A in the Camaro, and no good on the time from Wagner. So Wagner still with a bit of work to do. Mansueto in the Alpine. If you would like to keep up with the live timing in the Twitch chat, go ahead and use the ! timing command. We'll abandon that lap, so no improvement on this next lap. Prine in the Camaro goes P2. But if you'd like to keep up with the live timing, especially if you are sitting in pit lane wanting to see what the qualifying times will be, use ! timing in the Twitch chat and it will pull you up to the link, and just select the TRC server, TRC USA, in the drop down on the top of the webpage. Fastest lap currently at 204.167 from Lab A. Wagner did go second fastest, but he was invalid on that lap. DeHaro in the Porsche Cayman GT4 just sitting off to the side of the track for now. Goes back into the pit lane, but currently second fastest with a 205.312, at least in terms of the valid lap times. Smith in the Porsche Cayman GT4 coming through turn 11. Also trying to set a time on the board. Quite a few of our GT4 drivers still yet to set a time. Veldkamp is one of them. We'll see if we get a time here, though we do. Currently P10. Still waiting for one from Smith, waiting for one from Quain. And Torres in the McLaren, I believe that is the 570S GT4. And Mangut in the Aston Martin. Currently P23, looking to see if he can set a time. Still no time currently. And Harrell, longtime TRC veteran in the Alpine A110 GT4, still yet to set a time as well. It's Lab A on top for now. Looking for some improvement at 204.020 from Lab A. And is this a little bit of teamwork here between the two Camaros? That is the current P18 Camaro of Powers. And I believe not a newcomer to TRC, but a newcomer at least to the Wednesday series. trying to stay in the tow of Labe. DeHaro back in P2, Prine in P3, Quain P4. It's a lot of Camaros at the top, which is not necessarily surprising, as this track very top speed dependent with the amount of time that you can gain on the backstretch. And now far outside of the sight of Wagner. Wagner, I believe, only going to have one more opportunity at a flying lap, possibly two. It depends on how much time it takes him to get back to the start-finish line, but I don't think he will be able to get back quick enough. Has to start his next lap before the timer hits 0. When that timer hits 0, or 10 minutes, I should say, all of the GT4 cars are not allowed to start another flying lap, and they will be called in once they complete their next flying lap. And the M2 field will be able to take to the track and get started with their qualifying. Wagner, very concerning here to not have a qualifying time set. He is quick, but the time has been invalid. Elizondo in the server as well goes second fastest, but that time again still invalid. So we will have to wait and see if Elizondo can bring a valid time to the board. Elizondo definitely going to be one to watch in the number 15 Mercedes-AMG GT4. We saw him in the GT3, GT4. I believe that was the Manufacturers' Cup a couple seasons ago here with TRC. Elizondo, one of the champions, or at least the Mercedes team, taking home the championship in that series. DeHaro still in P2, Prine and P3, Quain P4. We do have one M2 beginning to queue at the end of the pit lane, and it is the 64 BMW M2 of Bird. Very quick driver there, will be definitely one to watch in the M2 field. Elizondo does set a time 21 thousandths of a second behind Labe, and with Elizondo having one more opportunity at a flying lap, Labe is definitely going to be at risk of losing this pole position, and I can tell you that Elizondo is absolutely pushing in that Mercedes AMG GT4. Let's have a bit of a ride along on this lap. 30 seconds until our M2 field is released, and they have started to queue at the end of the pit lane. The 616 of Veldkamp will be one of our first GT4 drivers. I think he will barely have enough time to go for another lap. He will have enough time, as the M2s have now been released, still yielding to Veldkamp in the Porsche, and Veldkamp will pull the Porsche into the pit lane. Had the opportunity to go for one lap, but will not be doing so. The 009 of Wagner, really needing a good lap here, needs to be valid. Currently invalid, and the quickest of the invalid drivers has not put a time on the board yet. We'll see if he plays it a bit safer on this lap. It brings one to the line. Currently P18 holding to the inside, does seem to have a time, and is good enough for P3. Do have the 22. If I can see the 22, that is the Camaro of Prine, currently P5. Looking to improve on this lap. Across the line will stay P5. What about the 99 Camaro of Powers? It does seem to be a bit slow coming out of the final corner, and still a time yet to be put on the board. Goes P16 for the GT4 field. Up next, we do have the number 18 McLaren GT4 of Bahena coming into the final corner, trying to get that McLaren rotated, and likely will be pulling this one into the pit lane. We do have a 1 hour endurance race. I believe that a stop is required. If anyone in the chat would be able to confirm for me whether or not a pit stop is required. The one of Harrell across the line, currently P17, goes third fastest, knocks Wagner down a position. And Elizondo was not able to improve, so Labe will be your pole sitter for GT4. And in GT4, Labe, Elizondo, Harrell, Wagner, Deharo, Prine, Mansueto, Quain, Miller, Bahena, Granado, Smith, Eddie Ewer, Veldkamp, Mengut, Powers, and Torres is your starting order for the GT4 field. Our M2s are on track and about to get started with their qualifying. The 54 BMW of Wright will actually be the first across the line, and will now be starting his first flying lap of the qualifying session. Now these M2s are going to be a bit slower. I don't think we should see too much time in between, or we shouldn't see these times getting too close between the M2s and the GT4s. A bit more of a disparity between the M2s and GT4s than you would have in, say, M2s and GT3s. But we will have some crossover. I believe we should have 2 crossover periods in the race. I believe we may have one about every 25 minutes. So it could make things very interesting towards the end of the session. And again, thank you all for tuning in. This is the season opener for the TRC GT4 M2 Cup Multi-Class Championship. And we will be getting started with a 1 hour, so 60-minute one-stop race here at Paul Ricard. Let's actually go on board with Wright, kind of watch the steering wheel behavior of these M2s as you come into the very, very quick right-hander of turn 8, and then once again have to get back on the brakes, try and trail brake through, carry as much speed. These BMW M2s, unlike your GT4s or your GT3s, they have a little bit more aerodynamic surfaces to rely on. In these M2s, it's pretty much all mechanical grip and momentum. Completely different driving style. You will see a lot more steering wheel usage, trying to search for grip, find grip, as I like to call it, fishing for grip. You are just trying to feel tension everywhere you can. Did have a bit of a blip there with Wright. But across the line, if this is valid, it will be the first time of the M2 session, and it is into the times of those GT4s, currently P17 overall. And Powers now may be at risk of being swallowed in that being swallowed in that M2 field. And that may make things a bit more interesting if you've got faster GT4 cars that are going to have to fight their way back through the M2 field. We do have one GT4 of Torres in the McLaren. Crater's second fastest in M2. That lap a 2:11.6. These BMW M2s a lot quieter than our GT4 field. But I can tell you they are putting in just as much, if not more, work in the cockpit of those cars. They're small and feisty, but that does not mean that they are just a nice Sunday cruise to drive. It's definitely going to be a bit of a handful, especially when they get close together. Currently Wright still on pole in M2, Craters P2, Merkel P3 in the M2s, Gonzalez P4, and three more M2s still yet to qualify. Bird being one, just coming around turn 9, but I think has invalidated there. If it is valid, it's just barely inside the track limits. Tucker, a newcomer in TRC. And Norman, TRC veteran, longtime TRC driver. You will recognize that name from many different series that I have commentated with TRC. Craters out of the final corner. These M2 drivers will have 2 more laps for their qualifying session. No improvement from Craters on that lap. I believe Merkel not quite just behind. Just behind is the 64 of Bird, who was invalid on that lap. Is quick. Still yet to bring a time. And Bird on that time was just ahead of, just behind Gonzalez, so that time would have actually put him P5 in the M2 field. So right, the quickest so far, and I think is done in qualifying. Has put himself ahead of one of the GT4 cars. The 185 of Gonzalez across the line, currently P4 in M2, stays P4. And will have enough time for just barely one more lap, I believe. .913 of Craters at the front, all on his own, and you would think maybe some slipstream from these M2s would help a lot in cooperation coming down the backstretch. Drafting is going to be a major factor in these M2s. There is a 2-tire set limit, so if you're out here in qualifying, you've got 1 set of fresh tires to take onto the race. And then from there, you can either start the race on scrubs and switch to fresh tires if you are switching tires in the pit lane. If somebody in the chat can tell me whether or not a tire change is required. Craters still P2 in the M2s. Tucker currently P5, looking for some improvement. Does not need much, about half a second would move him up 2 positions into 3rd place ahead of Merkel. So tire change is required. Do you start on these tires, or do you take new tires in the track or in the pit lane? There is going to be a gamble on tire strategy to worry about. That was the 12 of Norman, currently P6 in the M2 field. The 185 of Gonzalez, and I believe with the 64 M2 of Bird just behind. Gonzalez and Bird will bring an end to their qualifying session. Actually, no, I think they have just 1 more lap left. Gonzalez is not going to take any improvement, though. Will stay P4 at best. Bird, still invalid, has 1 more opportunity at a flying lap. The 913 of Craters, currently P2, has to find about 0.8 of a second on this lap to challenge for that pole position, and he is pushing on this lap. Let's go on board with him as he brings this lap to a close and brings this qualifying session to a close. Getting a lot of that inside curve that may have killed a little bit of speed. I don't think that's exactly what he meant to do there. Coming through turn 12 and then hard on the brakes for turn 13. Just trying to get the front end rotated, get the back end to follow. Nice and tidy out of the final corner. On the power early and across the line, needs a lot of time to improve. Is it enough to improve? It's an improvement by about 0.3 of a second, but it will not be enough. He will stay P2. Merkel currently P3 in the M2s. Coming into turn 11 now. And a bit of a slide coming into 12. That will take away a little bit of speed. The 64 of Bird, I believe, still on an invalid lap, or once again on an invalid lap, and will be starting at the back of the M2 field. Out of the final corner, across the line for Merkel in just a moment. And it does seem to be an improvement if he is still going on this lap. Needs half a second to move up into P2. He does not find it and does not get any improvement. Bird still good on this lap. Currently last in the M2s. It jumps up to P4 or P5 in the M2 field. So right on pole position for the M2s. And right craters Merkel, Gonzalez, Bird, Tucker, Norman, your M2 starting field. And we are just about to get started with the race. Formation lap will come next. We will take a short break, and when you come back, we will be started with our formation lap. Give me just a moment. Welcome back. We are engines fired and about to get started with our formation lap for the season opener for this GT4 M2 multi-class series. And Labe will see if he smokes the tires or not. Likely not going to. Wants to keep those tires in as good of shape as possible for this race. As again, there is a 2-tire limit for qualifying and the race. Practice as well, that's why most of the field did not come into or come onto the track out of the pit lane in free practice. So 24 cars behind, I believe. Yes, 25 cars it is. In total, 24 cars behind Labe. And we saw the dominant showing from Labe in the previous season, the posh British GT3 Will we see a similar result from Labbe? He's quick enough for pole, but again, it was not by much. 21 thousandths of a second separated Elizondo and Labbe. And maybe Elizondo opting for track position over starting position. Will be on the front row. A bit of weaving, trying to get those tires nice and warm. Riding the brakes to try and generate some brake temperature as well. Field goes a good ways back. Tucker and Torres, both in separate classes, will be on the back row of the field. Let's have a quick look at some of our paint schemes throughout the field. Again, Prine, TRC newcomer, Mansueto, newer to TRC but not new to TRC. Quain, one of our rookies. Miller, not new to TRC, longtime TRC veteran. Bahena, newer to TRC. Granados as well, Eddie as well. Smith in the Porsche Cayman GT4. Welcome to TRC. Ewer joined us last season in the TRC Posh British GT3. Veldkamp as well. Mango, if I'm saying that correctly, in the 69 Aston Martin, new as well. Wright in the BMW M2, your M2 pole sitter, making his TRC debut tonight. Gonzalez, I believe, as well. Bird, not new. It has been a while since we have seen Bird in one of these series. Tucker in the M2 and Torres in GT4. New to TRC as well, or at least new to me. So welcome in, everybody. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for the follow. I guess that's S-Claren Minna. It's like McLaren Senna, but different. I got it. It's clever. Labbe, Elizondo, Harrell, Wagner, your front two rows. There is a lot of talent between those four. DeHaro as well. And then it's rookies on back from there. Maybe some not quite having the pace in qualifying and needing to go out on track during the race and have the pressure of performance really bring the pace out of those drivers. 2 by 2, they line up 13 rows back as they approach the green flag. Labbe and Elizondo, the two titans from the previous series, going at it once again. And green, 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 we are racing here in the GT4 M2 Cup Series. They're 2 and 3 wide behind. Haro looks to go up the inside, trying to keep it nice and tidy between them. They're 3 wide behind with Bahena in the McLaren, and a touch of contact between them, and over goes. I believe that was the Aston Martin. It was one of the Aston Martins. I don't think it was Wagner. Sorry, that was the Porsche of Miller, who went for a tumble. One of the Camaros involved in that as well. And I believe that was the Camaro of Powers. I could be wrong. But a very eventful start. Not very often do we see a car go end over end here in TRC. We are definitely going to see some clips of that one later. Labbe and Elizondo, 2 V8s at the front of the field, actually make that 3. Wagner in the Aston Martin is there as well. Let's go on board with Labbe as they come into the fast-flying right-hander of turn 8. These top 3, I told you there was a lot of talent at the front of the field, and here they are, all 3 racing together. Gap has formed between Wagner and Harrell, and Elizondo wants to go up the inside of Labbe into turn 11. Is it going to be the old switcheroo from Elizondo? It is, but is it quite far enough to have it done? They'll be side by side into 12. Elizondo will now hold the inside. Wagner wants to jump into that fight as well. And now Elizondo with the inside at 13. Labe has to try and make room, and Labe gets pushed around the outside of the long way. Wagner now wants to try and jump in. A bit of contact between Wagner and Labe, and a drag race to the line between Labe and Wagner. And Harrell has jumped right back into that as well, leaning on each other. They are coming down the straight. Elizondo leads the first lap, but it is elbows out between these two behind. Wagner officially slots in the nose ahead, but Labe is going to be the quicker car down the backstretch. He has that to his advantage, especially just sitting there in the slipstream, but Wagner is not going to make this a very easy overtake. Knows that he has to try and make as much distance between himself and Labe. Labe puts a bit of a nose on Wagner and says, hey, it's not quite over yet. Elizondo, loving every bit of it, as now he has grown a gap to about a second to Wagner behind. But now, focus shifts to Wagner. Labe in the Camaro in that slipstream. How close is he going to be able to get by the time they get to the end of the straight? And just behind Labe, Harrell there as well, but not quite able to go as fast. Labe has pulled right up to the rear bumper once again. Does he go for the move up the inside? It's an absolutely daring move. If he wants to, he will try and at least force Wagner to concede some space, but it does not really go much to his advantage. A bit further behind, Prine and Mansueto in a battle. DeHaro and the Porsche in there as well, having themselves a three-way scrap for P5. Battle up at the front continues. Elizondo trying to pull away. Three-way fight for P2 ensues. And now Wagner able to open up a little bit of a gap. The Camaro is quick, but how does it fare in terms of longevity? Also tire choice. Some drivers out there have already put some wear on those tires, and definitely getting a bit impatient is Labe. And Wagner going to squeeze Labe to the inside, gives him a bit of a nudge, says, hey, I'm not too happy about that. And again, the ferocity between these two continues. Is it going to be a late braking move from Wagner into turn one? He puts the nose up the inside. Yes, it is. He wants to go for it, nearly making contact between the two, but very respectful for the most part. They are respectfully being disrespectful to each other. And who is this? Harrell wants to go up the inside, 3 wide nearly as they come into turn 3. But no, Harrell will once again just have to stay behind. The battle continues. Prine with Mansueto now forcing the envelope. Quain in the Camaro has found himself up there as well, put himself ahead of DeHaro. And now you may have a couple Camaros that are going to be working together coming down the straight. What has happened to Labe? Did he get put around? Now Wagner sitting duck at the front with Harrell in the Alpine behind, and Elizondo all on his own at the front. The battling behind has opened up that gap largely. What has happened to Labe, though, will drop down the order quite a few positions. Don't know if maybe he spun around. He didn't lose much time if he did. Battle between Bahena and I believe this Granados or Mango? It's Granados. Side by side into turn 9. Does Bahena try to go for the cutback up the inside? He will go for it. Has the nose, but does he have the speed? Not quite. And Granados will lock in the position just ahead. What about in our M2 field? Right, all on his own, and has the slipstream of Miller, who went for that tumble earlier. And not too much going on. We do have a fight here between Gonzalez and Bird. Bird, again, we did see have some issues bringing a clean lap to the line in qualifying. And track limit violations, always a concern here at Paul Ricard. Will we start to see our first penalties start to arise, especially as drivers are pushing early? Wagner and Harrell now on their own. Mansueto and Prine. Quain in the Camaro in the slipstream there as well. DeHaro had dropped a couple positions back, but is still in the conversation as well. And then Labe at the back of all of them, but again, was the quickest driver in qualifying. Will he be able to climb his way back up to the top of the field? Battle between Smith and Ewer. Smith in the Porsche, Ewer in the Mercedes. And they will be side by side out of turn 7. Smith still staying ahead, has to try and keep Ewer behind in the Mercedes. And Ewer will have that slipstream with a couple more cylinders to boot. Flat 6 versus V8. Wagner and Harrell still in battle between the two, but the gap has grown again. Now 5 seconds between Elizondo and Wagner. And Elizondo, in typical Elizondo fashion, pretty much has this one wrapped up early and cannot afford to make any mistakes. The Camaros getting a bit close to each other. Prine and Quain, will there be some cooperation? Does Mansueto, sorry, not Mansueto, that is DeHaro, wants to split them, and he will try to split them. But I believe that DeHaro is getting hounded by these Camaro teammates. Not going to make things easy for DeHaro to get past, but DeHaro is not going to make it very easy to defend him either. But is completely cornered. Box formation from 3 Camaros, all working together around. And as these 3 Camaros get linked up in the slipstream, will they become a force to be reckoned with? Battle between Wagner and Harrell continuing seems to have calmed down just a bit. DeHaro ahead of Quain and Labe, trying to stay in the slipstream of Prine. And that Porsche, very reliant on slipstream, cannot let Prine ahead get out of that slipstream range. And with the 2 Camaros behind that are going to be helping each other in the slipstream, going to have a lot of difficulty trying to hold them back as well. You are in the Mercedes, now under attack from Granados and Bahena. Granados in the Aston Martin in the slipstream. Will he be able to get close enough? Same thing with Wagner and Harrell. Harrell not close enough behind. Same thing with DeHaro and Quain. Quain and Labe linked up together. Smith, a long way to go to Ewer, but Ewer with Granados in the Aston Martin has closed right up to the nose. Bahena, he wants to go for it, and he will go for it. We're carrying a lot more speed in. Now we've got a 3-way fight between these 3, Bahena, Granados, and Ewer. Bahena's got it done past 1. Will he be able to get 2? As they come into turn 11. Bahena on the rear bumper of Ewer. And Granados has lost out big time there. Wagner and Harrell continuing on with their fight. And 10 minutes into this race, Elizondo still leads, and Elizondo is leading out even further. Almost 6 seconds the gap between Elizondo and Wagner now. DeHaro closing up on Prine. Quain and Labe back behind. Not really able to get much going in terms of pace. Ewer and Bahena going at it once again. Ewer in the slipstream. Will he be able to hold or keep up with the Mercedes of Ewer in the slipstream? Let's watch and see. These 3 in a bit of a slipstream train. Quick check-in with Harrell and Wagner. Wagner again holding steady there. Quain has Labe in the slipstream. I don't know if he will allow Labe to go past there. Ewer and Bahena. Bahena has the slipstream and is clearly closing up quite a bit. That McLaren does seem to carry a lot of speed in the slipstream. Just not quite close enough to go for the overtake. Maybe try the old switcheroo like he did on Granados earlier. You're able to get the nose in. At turn 10, you may be able to go for the overtake at turn 11, or at least try and scare the driver ahead into giving you the space. Quain and Labe side by side. Two teammates do seem to be racing each other a bit more than you would expect. Prine with DeHaro immediately behind me. Do have an Alpine off the track. Unsure which of the Alpines that is. That's Mansueto. I think he may have hit the ignition or something on that car. Was P4, has now dropped down quite a ways. Miller coming into the pit lane. And I think just coming in on an early stop, putting on fresh tires, and we'll run those tires from here to the end to try and regain some time. Prine with DeHaro and now Labe behind. The gap between Elizondo and Wagner. Elizondo leads by 6.3 seconds now. Prine, DeHaro, and Labe. And now DeHaro has to try and play defense. Prine with the Alpine of Harrell behind Harrell. Sorry, not the Alpine of Harrell, the Porsche of DeHaro. The cars look very, very similar between the two, but is that going to allow Labe to go for it? Are they going to be three wide coming into turn 8? There's not really room for three cars there, but they'll try and do it. DeHaro has to try and thread the needle between the two, but he's going to be boxed out. And now is Labe going to be afforded the space up the inside? Yes, he is. And Labe gets 2 for 1 at turn 8 and 9. In contact between DeHaro and Prine. And now DeHaro going to lose positions to both of the Camaros, but the two Camaros nearly take each other out. DeHaro splits the needle, or threads the needle between those two. And a lot of drama for the Camaro crew tonight. Powers now wants to try and hold on to it, is at least going to play defense for Labe, and is doing a very good job in doing so. DeHaro getting held up a bit there. And Labe back up into P4 now, has to try and run down Harrell and Wagner. Harrell and Wagner just kind of running laps on their own. They may have found somewhere that they are comfortable. Right, and the BMW M2s holding on to the slipstream of Veldkamp very far ahead. Craters P2 and M2, Norman P3. And this is where all of the M2 action is. Norman, Bird, and Gonzalez, all three here together, close to each other on track, fighting for that final spot on the podium in M2. And we do get our first penalty for track limits. It comes from the Camaro, the 99 Camaro of Powers, who will have to come into the pit lane and serve that drive-through penalty. Prine in the Camaro now starting to be under attack by the Porsche of Smith. What has happened there? Has DeHaro been involved in contact and gone back? The Alpine of Mansueto now further ahead. We'll see when they come to the next timing line how that gap updates. And Mansueto ahead of Prine. There may have been some contact between Prine and DeHaro. DeHaro with some damage drops down a couple positions. Bahena moves up ahead. DeHaro now trying to claw back a few positions as well. Prine with Smith in the Porsche behind. Smith will now try and gain whatever time he can. Labe and Harrell. Labe has no slipstream help. Has to try and catch Harrell and Wagner, who are slipstreaming with each other. The gap between those two getting a lot closer. Haro, I think, opting for the alternate strategy, goes ahead and comes into the pit lane, get the pit stop out of the way early, and try and just run clean for longer to get as much track position as possible. Power is in the pit lane to serve that drive-through penalty. Will have to come back into the pit lane to clear his pit stop at a later time. And the 99 Camaro gets the drive-through cleared. Good to go, as long as he does not get another one. And Haro off the jacks, rolling out of the pit lane. Has changed tires. Did he take any fuel? And will be the furthest driver ahead to have completed a pit stop. Miller will be far behind, but will not be able to overtake. Prine and Smith into turn 9. Prine out of turn 13, trying to hold the Porsche and McLaren at bay. The Porsche and McLaren about to get into a fight amongst themselves, and Wagner and Harrell getting closer and closer. This is kind of what we call the pressure cooker. They can continue racing this close, applying pressure to one or the other as long as they want, but eventually that pressure has to get released in either the overtake happening or an incident happening between the two. Something will happen between these two. Could just happen that maybe Harrell loses steam, drops back behind, and is not quite able to keep up. Maybe Harrell gets the overtake done. Maybe things fall apart between the two, but something will happen between these two. And we have more pit stops being taken. You are in the pit lane, Veldkamp in the pit lane, those two coming in. And we are seeing pit stops a little bit earlier, but again, they are on worn tires, or at least they could be on worn tires. Some drivers may have gone for their fresh set of sticker tires early. Norman in the pit lane as well. We are starting to see some more pit stops be taken. And who is on what set of tires? That could definitely be a conversation topic later on, especially as we have more of these 60-minute endurance races throughout this season. Wagner and Harrell just continuing to run nose to tail. Does Harrell finally get it done? It's a side-by-side drag race across the line. I don't think Harrell will quite be scored ahead. 68 thousandths of a second between the two of them at the line as they come into the turn 1 braking zone. Is not a late crossover move from Harrell, but again, just trying to force Wagner to the inside, and that may open the opportunity for Harrell to carry more speed out of turn 2. Traffic getting involved here as well. believe that was the 616 Porsche of Veldkamp who has come into the pit lane. Eddie and Mango come into the pit lane as well, and it's well on between Wagner and Harrell. Almost 11 seconds the gap between Wagner and Elizondo now, and Elizondo has now entered the nice Sunday drive classes. He is really far enough ahead where he can start to make slight mistakes and really not have to worry about it too much. Has thank you for the subscription again. And if you notice, I have given you VIP status, as I did a few of you who have been recurring subscribers for quite a long time. If there's anyone I have missed, please let me know. I've got a few more of those VIP slots to hand out, but again, Haz, you are one of those VIP subscribers. So again, thank you for your support, and you always support me, Haz. Haz has always stuck around. Mango gets a 30-second stop-and-go penalty for speeding in pit lane. Harrell and Wagner once again side by side out of the final corner. This time Harrell has the upper hand and likely will be scored ahead, but I don't think he has quite the top speed to hold the Aston Martin at bay. Once again, side by side between the two coming into turn one. Wagner this time for sure is squeezed to the inside by Harrell, trying the long way around the outside, just no speed to carry, no momentum. Elizondo in the pit lane from the lead. So that will leave Harrell and Wagner. Harrell was scored ahead, 71 thousandths of a second at the line, 3 thousandths of a second different than they were on the lap prior. Elizondo off the jacks, rolling out of the pit lane. Smith and Bahena for P8 having a battle amongst themselves. Smith just trying to hold back the hard-charging Bahena. He has worked his way through the field, definitely being comfortable in that McLaren GT4. Coming down into turn three. Does he try the long way around the outside? He will be able to get it done on the brakes. And a reverse switcheroo takes the suboptimal line around to the optimal line, and then swaps back to cover off the move. Side by side, they will be coming out of turn 7. And Smith kind of running out of road, but does just go ahead and take what he was given. Elizondo out of the pit lane. Granados off the jacks and rolling out of the pit lane. Powers in the 99 did serve that drive-through penalty earlier, is now coming down the pit lane to get his pit stop out of the way as well, and Mango will have to serve that 30-second stop-and-go penalty before too long. Back and forth battling between these two as they come into turn 8. Bahena in the McLaren wants to hold the inside. Does he have it? He will at least hold the inside long enough to force Smith the long way around. Smith now forced on the cutback. Bahena closes off the inside at 10, and then as they come through 11, Bahena will have the move covered off, at least for the time being. Between Wagner and Harrell. Harrell has dropped back just a bit, still within slipstream range. Wagner still up ahead, scored the leader on this lap, and Labe has gained a bit of time as these two have battled. That gap was 8 seconds. And Labe just inching closer and closer, may not be outside of the realm of possibility for a podium. You see those two, Wagner and Harrell, currently leading, and then Labe in the background not too long after. An assortment of pit stops completed and pit stops not completed. And we now have some of our class, our inter-class relations. DeHaro behind the M2 of Craters and Bird. I believe he has got past Bird, has Craters up ahead, and Wright not too far ahead either. So still awaiting Wagner and Harrell to come in, and Eager to see the conversation between the drivers post-race and what tires they went on. Maybe not so much sharing that information early on in the season. Maybe something we'll have to wait to the end for. Maybe there are some drivers who are sharing some crucial information. Bird in the M2 coming into the pit lane will be one of our first M2s to come in and get their stop completed. Norman will be the first of the M2s to complete a pit stop and will roll out of the pit lane. Bird still trying to find the box. Gap between Wagner and Harrell had opened up over a second. Harrell now getting a little bit of that time back, 0.9 between the two, and Labbe comes into the pit lane behind. So have you gone on the scrubs early? And Labbe needs to pay attention. I think he's trying to make sure that everything on the MFD is good for the pit stop. A slight brush with the pit wall. But have you gone on the scrubs to start the race? Did you go on the slicks early? Prine comes into the pit lane as well from P6. Wagner and Harrell. Harrell seems to gain some time through sector, really the latter half of sector 1. And looking at the sector times between the two, actually no, on the last lap, so Harrell is just barely quicker in sector 3 between the two. And again, if you would like to keep up with the live timing, use !timing in the Twitch chat and it will pull up the link to the live timing and you can follow along on your own. Thank you to those of you who are tuned in on the YouTube side. Don't interact with that chat as much, but as always, I appreciate those of you who are watching. And if you're watching the race replay on Twitch and you are not subscribed to the YouTube channel, broadcasts are only saved for a little while on Twitch before they are deleted automatically. I have no control over that, but if you would like to watch any race at any later date, they are permanently uploaded to the YouTube channel. Also, only about 30% of you who follow on Twitch are subscribed to the YouTube channel, and those of you who do watch the YouTube channel, only about 50% of you are subscribed. So if you would not mind hitting that like button and hitting that subscribe button, I would greatly appreciate it. Quain comes into the pit lane from P3. Again, still awaiting some cycle through of our previous race leaders, Elizondo being the one to watch. We are now officially halfway through the race. We have some Bahena fans on the YouTube side, currently running P5. Still has to come into the pit lane, so we'll see how that exactly transitions into a position post pit stop. But as of right now, is running nicely. Wagner and Harrell still on their fight, and Mansueto. Sorry, it looked like Mansueto had found his way in there. I believe that is still the 616 of Veldkamp, but now Harrell, I believe, seeing some tire fall off, going very, very wide through turn 8. Quain in the pit lane and Smith in the pit lane as well. Quain off the jacks and now rolling out of the pit lane. Craters P2 and M2s. Still those M2 cars needing to come into the pit lane. Car number 706, Quain the Camaro, was running very, very well tonight. Came out third of those drivers who had completed a pit stop and gets handed a drive-through penalty for track limits, I believe. It was just as he came out of the pit lane, so I would suspect it to be a speeding penalty, but it is not. Wagner from the race lead comes into the pit lane. Where is Elizondo? Not far behind. Is it going to be a quick enough stop for Wagner to come back out and stay competitive with Elizondo? That gap between the two was about 11 seconds when Elizondo came into the pit lane. Has Wagner staying out, starting to ease off of that battle with Harrell. Been able to close up the gap to Elizondo by any great measure. We will watch the 15 of Elizondo coming out of the final corner. The number 9 of Wagner waiting to drop off the jacks. And you do hear the V8 Mercedes getting closer and closer, just goes by. And Wagner still on the jacks in the pit lane. Bahena in the pit lane, rolling it down to the box, trying to find the box. And it does get stopped. Misses the box just a little bit, had to throw it in reverse because there was a BMW M2 in that spot, had to share the space. Not quite enough real estate to go around for everybody. It's a bit of a slow stop, but Bahena running very, very strong today. Should not be too much of a hindrance for him. Harrell now all on his own at the front. Mansueto a bit further back, in the previous race leader, Elizondo, not far behind as well. And Mansueto may lose a lap here as Elizondo goes by. The 119 of Labe gets a drive-through penalty for track limits, and track limits in these GT4s, I knew it was going to be an issue. Track limits always are here at Paul Ricard. Very easy to overstep to try and gain a little bit of time, or maybe you go a bit wide offline and say, oh, well, maybe it won't be too bad. One track limit warning won't hurt, then maybe two, then maybe three. But on that fourth one, you get handed the drive-through penalty. Both Quain and Labe, two Camaro drivers. And I believe it was Powers as well who got a drive-through. So 3 of our 4 Camaro drivers have gotten drive-through penalties, and there was some talk pre-race in the chat about those Camaro drivers having some trouble keeping it between the lines. Big, heavy American V8 sports car. Not quite the easiest to wrangle around the French countryside here at Paul Ricard. And a lot of Bahena fans on the YouTube side. So to those of you who are on YouTube, let's go on board with Bahena for just a little bit. GT4 of Bahena, currently the furthest ahead. I believe the only McLaren GT4 on track. Currently running P10, but 3 cars ahead. The M2 leader of Wright in the pit lane will gain a spot there. Wright still heading down the pit lane to find the box. Craters not far behind, also coming into the pit lane. Harrell staying out. It is Harrell going for the long haul to be on those fresh sticker tires for as short as possible, or maybe just trying to gain as much time as possible by staying out, not having to battle. And where is Wagner? Because it was Harrell and Wagner, these two fighting. Harrell has a little bit of traffic around him, so it may be not going to be the easiest for Wagner to run nice and clean. But the Aston Martin just ahead, I believe that is the Aston Martin of Mango, will be getting some blue flags as Wagner gets a bit closer. Craters in the pit lane. Merkel in the pit lane. And has right cleared the pit stop, yes, and is back out on track. Labe still to serve that drive-through penalty and likely will come in on this lap to serve that penalty. Don't want to risk getting another one, and yes, he will. On the brakes, trying to pull in your pole sitter. Currently running P5. Would have had a hard charging run onto the podium. Pretty much would have been on the podium. Having to serve a drive-through penalty and making things a little bit more difficult for him. Mansueto in the pit lane, and I believe that will leave Harrell, the sole GT4, to come into the pit lane and complete the pit stop. The 12 of Norman gets a drive-through penalty for track limits in the BMW. We will await the pit stop from Harrell. Now that pit stops have cycled, we are getting back into our battles. Smith and Quain in a battle here, coming through turn 11 into 12 and 13, and the Porsche against the Camaro. A sitting duck if that Porsche does not have the benefit of any slipstream. Not a top speed powerhouse is that Cayman GT4. But the Camaro Z01 1LE GT4R is definitely going to be the quickest car out there in terms of raw speed at the end of that straight. And Smith now playing defense, trying to keep that Camaro behind a big slide coming out of turn 2. As they come into turns 3 and 4. Quain still trying to close the gap. Labe and Mansueto. Labe having served the drive-through penalty that has put Mansueto right there in the conversation, and Mansueto on fresh tires or fresher tires, having just coming out of the pit lane, may be a bit of an obstacle for Mansueto. I think with the gap that has been made, Labe should still be fairly comfortable on the podium, but now it is going to be a battle between Mansueto and Labe for that last spot on the podium. We'll see where Harrell lines up when he comes out of the pit lane. Almost has a lap on Labe and Mansueto. Where is the 43 of DeHaro? Has DeHaro been lapped? No, not quite. DeHaro just behind Mansueto and Labe, and not far behind if something were to happen between Labe and Mansueto. DeHaro would be right there to pick up the pieces, and if Mansueto were to drop back and DeHaro grabbing that slipstream, may definitely be possible for DeHaro to have a charge towards Labe. Labe going a bit deep into turn 3. Do not want to risk another drive-through penalty. And Harrell comes into the pit lane from the race lead. That should give it back to Elizondo. We will wait and see as Elizondo comes out of the final 2 corners. Harrell is stopped and is in the box. We await to see when he drops off the jacks. Elizondo coming out of the final corner. Just wait for Harrell to come off the jacks. Is switching tires now. Elizondo just goes by, so Elizondo will resume the lead of the race. Harrell currently P2. What about Wagner? Wagner pit quite a while ago, so Mansueto will be on fresher tires. Harrell will be on fresher tires in theory. What about Wagner? Is it going to be a drag race between the two? Has the strategy worked out for Harrell? Does not have any speed, has to yield. Wagner goes by, and I think the gap may just stay as it was between the two. So Wagner will be scored P2, and Harrell actually may have lost out a bit, that gap a bit further than slipstream range, as Harrell now has a bit of work to try and catch the Aston Martin of Wagner once again. Mansueto and the Lab A with DeHaro just inching ever so much closer. Welcome in, Pep. Good to see you. DeHaro inching ever so much closer. Mansueto trying to hold on to the slipstream of Lab A. Lab A was our pole sitter in qualifying, so not quite going to be the easiest thing to do. And Mansueto getting it a bit wrong going deep into turn 3. That will open up that gap a bit more. Battle between Smith and Quain. As they come onto the front stretch, Quain has overtaken Smith, and Smith now has the task of trying to stay in that slipstream range. Lab A still in the lead of the race. I think we may have a battle here between Veldkamp and Eddie. It was a battle between Veldkamp and Eddie. I believe Veldkamp has been overtaken. That is the Mercedes of Elizondo lapping Veldkamp there. And now trying to catch up to the Aston Martin of Eddie. Quain and Smith still in their battle. Camaro versus Porsche. Camaro versus Cayman, I should say. And clambering over the curbs is Quain. Will that allow Smith to maybe close that gap up just a bit? The Porsche will rotate better through the corners than the Camaro, but just does not necessarily have the top speed to contend. And Mansueto gets a drive-through penalty for track limits. Will have to serve that and will drop well down the order. Will give a few positions back. I believe it'll be about 30 seconds in the pit lane to serve that penalty, which would put him back about 5 or 6 positions. Wagner and Harrell. Harrell closing up once again. And Harrell pit much later. In theory, should have fresher tires as we get down to the closing stages of this race. How much will those tires be a benefactor to Harrell, though? That is the major question to ask. Wagner with Harrell behind. These two have been at it all race. The Alpine A110 GT4 does seem to get a bit of a deeper drive into those last 2 corners, but just does not have the low-end acceleration to contend with that Aston Martin. It does take quite a while for the Alpine to build up enough speed to fight that spot back as they come into turns 1 and 2. But out of turn 2, this is where the Alpine really starts to get its drive. Being mid-engine, not front engine, the weight is a bit more evenly distributed. And a nose to tail, as they've done almost all race. Harrell wanted to go for the late braking move, old switcheroo into turn 5. It will not work through turn 6 and 7. Harrell just once again has to stay behind and see if he can get this overtake on or with the slipstream. Again, it will take a while for that Alpine to build up enough speed down the backstretch to get close to the Aston Martin. The Alpine with a bit of a flash of the lights, maybe seeing himself on stream is Harrell. Harrell going to chuck it later on in. Don't do it just because the stream is on you. Maybe do it because it makes for good content. a lot more body roll and lean in these GT4s than you would see in GT3s, but not quite as much body roll and lean as you would see in our M2 field. And a battle in the M2s here between Craters and Bird. Craters was ahead. Bird got the overtake down the backstretch, at least at the timing line. Bird was ahead. Craters, I think, has now got it back, and side by side they go through turn 8 between the two of them. Bird will still hold on to the position up the inside. Will Craters be able to fight it back? What about the gap between Wagner and Harrell? Once again, nose to tail. It took a while for the pit stops to be situated, for them to get back into this fight. The pit strategy that Harrell took, at least initially, did not quite benefit Harrell, but Harrell pitting later on theoretically fresher tires. Don't exactly know if Harrell is on fresh tires or scrubs or what tires any of the drivers went on. But Wagner and Harrell just continuing on with their fight. Bahena trying to catch the Alpine of Mansueto, who has served that drive-through penalty. And Bahena very, very quick in that McLaren. It's Granados, then Mansueto. And Bahena is right there behind, very eager to get on that throttle and try and close that gap. Bahena wants to fight Mansueto for P8. Between Wagner and Harrell, it continues. As they come into turn 9, Wagner much deeper this time. Will the opportunity arise for Harrell? A bit of monkey see, monkey do, as the door was open, but Harrell just kind of following, was not in the position to go for it. Now things getting maybe a bit more dire for Wagner. Has he started to experience some of that tire fall off? Came in much earlier than Harrell, or should I say Harrell stayed out much later. And now Wagner having to go very, very defensive. And a very poor exit of the final corner. For once, Harrell may have a run up the inside, just barely starting to inch further and further ahead. As they come into turn 1, the Aston Martin, at least with its top speed, does manage to pull back ahead. The Alpine just not quite able to compete in that top end, top of the RPMs, top of the rev range, top of the gears in that top speed. 74 thousandths of a second between those two at the line, but we have seen 68 thousandths of a second, 71 thousandths of a second, now 74 thousandths of a second between those two. And Harrell once again maybe having the opportunity to go for the late braking lunge into turn 5, but just thinking a bit better of it. And maybe that move is on the cards later on. Battle between Ewer and Quain. Quain in the Camaro, Ewer in the Mercedes. Again, watching Bahena and Mansueto, that gap was 1.3, 1.9 now, but we will see if that gap starts to fall once again. It was a battle between Craters and Bird for P2 and M2. Bird now has opened that gap up to 1.4 seconds, about a second and a half. Battle between Miller and Ewer, battle between Granados and Mansueto. And as we do watch the gap to Bahena, if Granados and Mansueto continue to fight, which they are side by side, coming into, I believe this is turn 3 and 4. What has happened to the 12 of Norman, just going a bit offline and getting a yellow flag. At least getting a yellow flag waved. Granados and Mansueto side by side, they come through, and Granados will get the position done. And Bahena still behind. That gap 2.7 seconds now between the two. Oh, sorry, just a moment. I hit the wrong button, accidentally went to the replay. We will be right back on board with the coverage. So, sorry about that. Between Wagner and Harrell, half a second there. Granados and Mansueto. Still nothing has changed. 8 minutes left to go in the race. Mansueto trying to line up the old switcheroo as the clatter over the curves nearly makes contact, does make contact, albeit very slight contact between the two. And now it's elbows out between these two. Mansueto tries to get the later drive into turn 12. Will he go for the cutback at turn 13? Will not be afforded the space. Granados will hold the station up the inside. The 99 of Power is getting another drive-through penalty for track limits, and Bahena is right there in it. We'll see how that gap updates. 0.7 of a second, 793 thousandths, 7.9 tenths of a second between the two. And Mansueto gets the position back. Bahena is right there in it now, and this is your battle for P7 between Wagner and Harrell. Things getting a bit dicey. Once again, they are closer and closer to each other. Don't think Harrell will quite be close enough coming into the final corner. No, he goes for the lunge. Now is the time to do it. Does he get afforded the space? He affords Wagner the space around the outside. That will give Wagner the better exit of the final corner and the better drive. Just a couple more laps to go in this battle. Going on board with Mansueto, looking behind. Granados in the Aston Martin will close up quite a bit. The Alpine going to be the sitting duck here. The Aston Martin